Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart for those of you that are new. And today I'll be breaking down the main slate here on DraftKings. $1 million up top to first place as usual. I'll be going through kind of my favorite value plays, core plays, favorite stacks, all that good stuff in this video. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Check out my Twitter at HartDFS. A lot of you really liked kind of my recap there and going into the game for Thursday Night Football, just all the stats. So let me know if you guys want more of that. More than happy to throw that up there. Once again, do really appreciate all the support. Hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get right into this breakdown. So to start off here, let's take a look at the quarterbacks first. So when looking at the quarterbacks for the top players, I think it's another one of those slates where the pricing is still pretty soft across the board for pretty much every position, especially running backs. So there's a lot to like here for this slate going into tomorrow. But for the quarterbacks, as you can see at the top, we have Allen, Lamar, Hurts, and Burrow. And there's a kind of a big drop off in terms of production to Kyler Murray and the rest below. But right now, I mean, I think it's going to be one of those things where you either go to one of the top four guys here, or you kind of go down to the lower end of the range, like a Fields, like a Lawrence, or even a Mac Jones, who's going to be a really solid value play with no Brock Purdy playing for the 49ers and Mac Jones taking over there. So that's kind of my take there on the quarterbacks is you're going to want to get to at least one of the top four here. My favorite out of these top four would probably be, I think right now I'm leaning towards Jalen Hurts, but him, Jackson, and Burrow are kind of my three favorites, and Josh Allen would be kind of the fourth for me in terms of the ranking there. But really like getting to at least one of these top four quarterbacks. And then if I don't get to one of those, maybe going to a guy like Justin Fields with the rushing upside there, or just paying down for a guy like Mac Jones. Obviously, not the best, but at $4,000 starting quarterback, we saw what he was able to do with Brian Thomas Jr. last year on the Jaguars when he took over for Trevor Lawrence. More than capable, especially at $4,000, to go out there and get 15 to 20 fancy points. Hey, maybe he goes for more. At $4,000, that's really, really going to set you up for being able to pay up for other spots, running back, wide receiver, tight end, etc. So that's kind of what everyone's leaning towards, is kind of going to Mac Jones. He's kind of floating around 18% owned, and the Millie Maker right now at $4,000. But as I mentioned, one of the top four guys looks amazing. In terms of kind of like secondary options you guys can go to in terms of contrarian plays, I don't mind getting to Kyler Murray here. Obviously, you can stack him with Marvin Harrison Jr., James Conner, Trey McBride, and they're going against Carolina, who looks god-awful. So that, 6,400 for Kyler is not bad, especially when he's a guy who does have rushing upside. So I think he's a really, really strong kind of secondary option if you don't want to go for one of the top guys or pay down for Mac Jones. Another guy that sticks out to me is going to be Jared Goff here. Playing back at home in the Dome. Obviously, he's 0-19 when he has not, been coached by Sean McVay or Ben Johnson in terms of the coordinators there. Obviously, they lost at Green Bay, but going against the Bears, they're at home. I expect this team to kind of pick it back up, and when they play at home, they usually do pretty well. So he's another strong secondary option there. $6,000. You can pair him with Jameson Williams. You can pair him with Amon-Ra. You can pair him with Sam Laporta, and obviously you can pair him with Jahmyr Gibbs and even David Montgomery. So the Lions are a team I'm really, really strong on just because of the game environment there going against the Bears. Dak Prescott, another guy I really, really like. I'll kind of touch on these guys and kind of my favorite stacks, but I'm just quickly mentioning them. He's another guy that stands out to me as kind of a contrarian play there going against the Giants. Moving on down more. Not a ton. I mean, Caleb Williams, as I said, they'll probably be down here. They'll probably be down big. So he's a guy that, is probably going to throw the ball 30-plus times. As we saw in the last game, capable runner, going to be running probably a lot more this year than he did last year, and kind of utilizing that. So he's another person that you can get to. And then I will mention Tua in the Dolphins. I know it's disgusting. I know it's gross after what happened last week. And then the fact that they had a players meeting. As we all know, having a players meeting, especially after week one, I mean, the team's cooked, but he's one of those guys as you saw from last season. He can go out there and get 25, 30-plus fantasy points because they still have Waddle, they still have Tyreek, and they still have Achane. So I will mention him. They're not getting a lot of steam right now just because of how bad they were last week. Guys that did well last week that, people will probably still go to. I don't love Daniel Jones going against Denver. I mean, they're just a super, super tough defense. Daniel Jones, he looks good last game, but still, it's Daniel Jones. I don't love it there. I will mention Joe Flacco. A game that could be a shootout. Another one of those guys who could throw the ball, as you can see, threw it 45 times against Cincinnati. Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Fannin Jr., Njoku, another guy at $5,000 you can pair up with a decent amount of pass catchers and still have a ton of money left over to spend up for other places. So that's my take there for the quarterback situation. So moving on over to the running backs here for me. Right now, Christian McCaffrey's coming in at like 45 to 50% owned in the Millie Maker. And the reason is he's just way too cheap. Like, he's pretty much an auto lock right now, $7,500. Brock Purdy's out, so they're going to have Mac Jones starting. No Greg Kittle. And obviously last game he saw 31 touches with Greg Kittle. Obviously we lost him throughout that game, but still 31 touches for a guy who's $7,500. Obviously not going to guarantee 31 touches this game, but they're playing against the Saints. No George Kittle. Everything's going to funnel through CMC, Ricky Pearsall, and maybe Juwan Jennings if he plays. If he's out, obviously it's a little bit of even more upside for a guy like Ricky Pearsall and CMC. So it's going to be really hard not to auto lock CMC in this spot. $7,500 for a guy who should see 25 plus touches in this game and be heavily relied on. He's by far the best play of the slate just in terms of upside versus the price tag. So CMC there, going to be extremely popular, but for good reason. So it's really hard not to just auto lock him in there as a core play, as most people are going to do for this Millie Maker slate. In terms of the rest guys here at the top, obviously Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley. We know what they're getting from there. Obviously, I'd rather go to Barkley over Henry just because of the pass catching upside. Absolutely love Jahmyr Gibbs in a bounce back spot. He's a guy who saw 10 targets, wasn't very efficient, only 31 yards, but still massive upside there. Playing at home, expect a bounce back spot here against the Bears, whose defense is pretty solid, but still, I think there's just massive amount of upside there for Jahmyr Gibbs. Same thing with Achane and Brown, two guys who are going to see all the touches in the backfield. Obviously, the upside there for the pass catching upside for Achane is massive, 6,900. Expect a bounce back game there for the Miami Dolphins. Chase Brown, 6,800, saw all the attempts out of the backfield. We'd like to see a little bit more involvement in the passing game, but still 6,800 for a guy who's on a pretty high-powered offense. Really, really like that. I don't love Jonathan Taylor at 6,700 against the Denver defense. Moving on down here more towards the mid-range, a lot to like as well. James Conner going against Carolina, 6,600 looks really good, even though Trey Benson's kind of eating a little bit into his touches there. James Cook, same thing. The only guy I feel confident about on the Bills team is James Cook at 6,400. So he's a possible stacking player with a guy like Josh Allen. As you can see here, he saw 5 targets out of the backfield, which is nice to see. Moving on down more, Kyren Williams, they said they're going to kind of decrease his workload a little bit. He saw pretty much every attempt. So they were aligned once again. He looks pretty solid. Breece Hall, not a lot of people are on him after a really, really impressive game one there. Looks like they're going to absolutely pound the ball. They didn't really go to the other 2 running backs, Braylon Allen and I forget the other guy, Davis maybe. It was pretty much the Breece Hall show. He looks really good there at 6,200 going against the Buffalo Bills defense, who we just saw Derrick Henry absolutely tear up. Really like the upside there for Breece Hall. Alvin Kamara saw kind of a career low in terms of catches out of the backfield and just overall looks from Spencer Rattler. So not the best, especially with Kellen Moore. He doesn't like to target the running backs a ton. Never really had like a Alvin Kamara type, but still, it's a little bit of something to keep an eye on. Don't love, but with a lot of people going to a lot of the 49ers, obviously it's a perfect natural bring back with a guy like Alvin Kamara, 6,100. We know the pass catching upside. Expect more than 2 targets in this game here for him. So at 6,100, he looks solid. Chuba, just like James Conner, really, really like him there at 6,000. Another guy who's projecting pretty well is Tony Pollard. Obviously, the team's not the best. Would love to see more involvement in the pass catching game there. Only 1 target, 1 catch. Not the best in terms of matchup going against the Rams, but still 5,900 for a guy who saw, once again, one of those bell cow backs who has seen every single kind of touch and look. Another one of those guys I really like. DeAndre Swift, kind of a guy who's going to fly under the radar. He was a horseback, saw 20 attempts there. Really like the upside, especially the pass catching ability. Another guy, Travis Etienne, huge bounce back game here after a guy who everyone was kind of out on. 21.5 fantasy points there, massive upside. Did break off a huge run, which really helped his kind of average there, but still 5,700 for a guy in this spot against the Bengals looks really, really solid. Moving on down here, a few other guys. I will mention Travion Henderson. They mentioned how they really liked him. Obviously, saw 6 targets out of the backfield, which is great. Expect him to get a little bit more rushing attempts as well. So he's kind of a secondary guy I have my eye out on. Same thing with David Montgomery. Really, really love this matchup and bounce back spot going against the Bears. In the game, they should be up. Game script should be geared towards them. So really like that. In terms of the rest of the guys, Tracy Jr., I think he's a solid option there, just with the pass catching ability. Below that, not a ton to like. Judkins is back, so it kind of takes Sampson out of play for me. In terms of any values, nothing's really sticking out to me for some value plays. I think there's just a lot to like in terms of these top guys. I will mention Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, 2 guys who split the backfield, have that pass catching upside, but I don't think there's a need to get down to them. Moving on to wide receiver here, obviously Jamar Chase, bounce back spot candidate. Looks fantastic there at 8.1. Don't mind getting the CD, especially if you're going with the stack. Puka, another guy who's projecting very well. Looked like a clear alpha once again. 11 targets, caught 10 of them, 130 yards. It's just too cheap for 7.6K. Malik Neighbors, don't love that Russell Wilson's throwing the ball, but it's great to see 12 targets. Another game where they most likely will be down. This is kind of sneaking up. It's kind of one of my favorite second games, or kind of my second favorite game to target would be this Dallas and New York Giants game, just because of the pass catching ability from all of the wide receivers across the board for both teams. Head on down here and kind of into this mid range. Once again, Brian Thomas Jr. I think he had the worst catch percentage in balls thrown towards him from Trevor Lawrence in the NFL last week. Yet on opposite end of that, all the balls thrown to the other wide receivers, Trevor Lawrence had like the highest completion percentage. So it was just extremely unlucky for Brian Thomas Jr. there in terms of last game. So expect a huge bounce back for him. They're going to get him involved. They've been talking about it a lot, and especially in this matchup against Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, he's going to be super popular, but for good reason at 6,700. Amon-Ra, love him. A.J. Brown. He looks really, really strong there against Kansas City. Another guy who was out there, only caught 1 catch. People didn't know if he was hurt or what was going on. He says he's all good. I expect him to be a lot more involved. I think I prefer Devontae Smith just slightly over him, just because of the big play upside and kind of how Kansas City likes to run their defense. Expect them to kind of bracket A.J. Brown a little bit, but still, I think it's a solid price tag for him. As I mentioned, the Dolphins, don't be shy to go back to the Dolphins, even after that brutal game 1. JSN kind of looks like the entire offense there for the Seahawks. Don't love the just overall offensive ability and kind of the defense in the matchup here, but he's a guy who's worth mentioning. DK Metcalf, revenge game narrative, if you guys are big into that, you can go there. But in terms of kind of my favorite wide receivers, I'll kind of quickly go through this. Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra, Brian Thomas Jr., moving on down a little bit more to a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm still really, really high on him. George Pickens, I love this bounce back spot for him. Moving on down a little bit more, Devontae Smith, love the matchup against Kansas City. Tet McMillan, once again, 5.4K, wide receiver 1 upside, going against Arizona. He looks fantastic. Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, the 49ers with no Greg Kittle, they're going to have to pick up the slack there. Even with Mac Jones throwing the ball, they should be more than capable to pay off those low price tags. Hollywood Brown, number 1 wide receiver for the 49ers, with Xavier Worthy being rolled out. So he's going to be super popular as a value play there at 5.2K. Moving on down a little bit more, another guy that sticks out to me, Calvin Ridley. Kind of just a brutal game there for him. He had 2 huge drops, so it would have been a pretty decent game there in terms of probably like 7 catches for like 60, 70 yards in a really tough spot there against Denver. So I really like a bounce back spot here. And once again, don't love them going against the Rams, but still 4,900 for a wide receiver 1 who should see 8 to 10 targets, if not more. He looks really, really good. As I mentioned, Juwan Jennings, something to keep an eye out on. If he's good to go, nothing holding him back. He looks pretty solid there at 4,800. Moving on down a little bit more. Booty was the wide receiver one there for the Patriots, but I think I'd still rather get to Stephon Diggs over him. In terms of the rest, it really kind of does it for me in terms of the wide receivers. I will mention Juju Smith-Schuster, wide receiver 2 there for the Chiefs with no Xavier Worthy. I kind of expect this, type of production, around 5 to 8 targets, catching 75% of them, anywhere from 40 to 70 yards. You just hope he gets into the red zone. Even if he doesn't, I still think that's very strong for a guy at flat minimum 4,000. Just expect him to kind of be in those short to intermediate throws in range for him. Don't really expect, any huge breakaways or long catches, but still flat minimum 4,000 looks really strong. That's really it for me in terms of wide receivers. Obviously, you could look at New Orleans, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Juwan Johnson. They all saw around, I think it went like 9, 10, and like 11 targets for each. So Spencer Rattler looks more than capable of kind of getting them the ball, which I had lower expectations, but he did a little bit better than usual. But we went on to the tight ends here to kind of finish things up. Trey McBride, another one of those kind of core plays for me. With no George Kittle, it's a huge drop-off just in terms of kind of looks that you're guaranteed in terms of these tight ends. And obviously Trey McBride is a focal point for the offense there on the Cardinals, and it's a huge drop-off, as I mentioned. Going down to Kelsey, who still should have more upside, with no Xavier Worthy, but he looks run down. I don't get it. I don't love the price tag, but obviously the opportunities are there for him, so he's fine. Moving on down below there, it's no one to really feel good about besides, going into Warren there. He looked really, really strong, but don't love the matchup. Laporta, Andrews are fine, but Andrews only had one target in a game that they really needed people to step up, and it was just a Zay Flowers and King Henry show. So stay away from me. Njoku didn't look the best. Fannin Jr. got more looks, but I still love the upside there, especially in this game environment. A guy that no one's really talking about there, 4,400. Love him. Below that, not a lot to like. You can go to Calcaterra for the Eagles, who's the backup to Dallas Goedert. Really about it. I don't mind getting to Kincaid with Josh Allen stack. As I mentioned, Juwan Johnson got a lot of looks there, 12 targets, 8 catches. Seems to be pretty heavily involved in the offense moving forward. But that's really it for me. Not a ton of interest in the tight ends for me this week. Tongas will get some looks as kind of the backup tight end with no George Kittle. Fannin Jr. looked great. We'll see if that production, keeps up there. There's a lot of kind of dump downs to him, so that kind of did inflate his number. But, 3,100 for a guy who should be seeing at least 5 targets a game. They did involve him in the backfield as well. So he looks decent. That's really it for me. As I mentioned, not a lot of interest in the tight ends for me besides McBride at the top. And then I'd say Njoku. Those are my top 2 plays, and then maybe Kelsey. And then moving on to defense here. I just love loading up on either the Niners defense, the Broncos defense, or getting on down here to, the Lions defense, or even the Steelers. Those are kind of my favorite defenses right now to target. And then, as I mentioned, kind of my core plays are going to be CMC and McBride. I know those aren't really standout plays just because everyone's going to be on them. But other guys I want to mention kind of the top 10 highest owned guys on the slates are going to be CMC, Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, Achane, Hollywood Brown, Trey McBride, Kyron Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Chase Brown, T. Higgins, Kelsey, Brian Thomas, and CeeDee Lamb. Those are going to be kind of the highest owned guys on the slate. And then throwing Mac Jones for a value quarterback. That's going to be kind of how people are going to be attacking the slate. So in terms of kind of top plays, let's go over kind of secondary stacks that I do like. We'll kind of skip the top guys for here. As I mentioned, Kyler Murray here, and then we can throw in, if you wanted to, we'll just go to the top plays. We'll just throw in James Conner. We'll do Marv, and then we'll do Trey McBride. one of those guys. Let's just take out James Conner for now. Kyler Murray stack. You could do a bring back with Tat McMillan or even Chuba Hubbard like that. Let's clear that. Another kind of top stack I do like here a lot is going to be Dak. And then for wide receiver, I don't mind going to both Pickens and CD just with upside. And then you can do a bring back with Malik Neighbors there at 7,100. You still have 4,600 left over. And then obviously you can pay down at D and put in some value at the flex, and you'd still have a good amount to be able to get to CMC if you wanted to in this lineup. And let's go to one more here for you guys. One more I do like is going to be, let's go to Jared Goff. 6,000. Obviously don't love the fact that he doesn't really have rushing upside, but pairing him with either a Jahmyr Gibbs, or I think you can get a little bit weird. Like, I really think on this slate, a big bounce back game here for David Montgomery. Obviously, there's not a ton of correlation there. You know, Montgomery will see some targets out of the backfield, so I don't mind it. But it's just kind of the TD equity when they get into the red zone. I really like Montgomery. It helps your stack get a little bit different and weird there with Jared Goff and him. And then you can pair him with either Jameson Williams. I do really like him in the bounce back spot against the Bears, 5.7K. Or just, it's a little bit easier just to kind of trust $7,000 for Amon-Ra. So that's a pretty interesting stack. And then you could get to, obviously, DJ Moore. Wasn't heavily involved there, only 5 targets, but still ran a ton of routes. Roma Dunze, as I mentioned, a guy who's going to have a lot of upside this year. Got the touchdown, 9 targets. So once again, I think the Bears are going to be down. So I think you could do like a double bring back for the Bears there in a game that could be a slightly potential shootout. So those are kind of my favorite stacks as of right now. The core plays, as I mentioned. Let's get CMC back in there. Let's get Trey McBride, and then we'll do one more core play for you guys. Let's see here. Let's go to wide receiver. I think right now I'm really, really liking Devontae Smith here in this matchup against Kansas City. Just expect some huge plays coming from him. Another guy, bounce back spot here. Only saw 3 targets, 16 yards. One of those things where there's going to be some games for the Eagles where it's just going to be the CMC and Jalen Hurts show, and the pass catchers are really not going to do anything. Obviously, Dallas Goedert had a pretty solid game there, but it was those 3, and then Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Didn't really need them. Sure, they could have used them, but still, they're kind of the afterthoughts there. Expect a huge bounce back spot for them. So these are my 3 core plays as of right now. And then, as I mentioned, I went over those stacks. A lot to like here. So I hope you guys liked the video. Hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.